Hey, how are you?
Today, we're joined by author John Reily, who dives deep into the stories and legends that make Wilmington, Delaware such a unique place. We talk about his book on Ed Oliver, one of the area's most fascinating golf figures, and other local history that continues to fly under the radar.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I was texting with an old friend of yours last night. He said that I can mention him, Joe Gillibo. He's taught me a ton, and it's through meeting people like that. He's one of the reasons actually I do this, because I
Is he
want to
writing
share.
his caddy book?
What's
He
that?
called me with the idea of writing a book about caddies. Is he doing
He
that?
he did tell me that, and he told me he's like you can go do that if you want, and I was like, that's the genesis of this, is him telling me that. And I consider, because I've caddied as well, and you meet characters, and I'm a character, and um, just the wild stuff you hear. I'm sure you know it. I read your bio last night, and it was eye-opening how much, I mean, you've been around this game a long time and are very accomplished, and I have so many questions just based off of that, like the local legend of this stuff. Um, there's fascinating stuff in there. The stuff about Bitterman, I was particularly interested in.
I get into so many debates with people about Bitterman, and I always go, "Nope, that is," because everybody just says, "Oh, well, they just built a second nine." I mean, nope, that is absolutely not that golf course. Maybe the ninth hole was part of it. That was about it.
Wow. So I didn't know that there was golf there before. And what was the original course like?
Very, very little memory of it. So
Okay.
I'm in the caddy shack one day, and Angie, the caddy master, says, "Riley, now you got to understand when they say Riley, 15 heads turn. Like, Riley, which one? I got, I got four brothers there and 12 cousins. Said, get Mr. Weymouth's clubs and meet him at the top of the circle. It's Wilmington Country Club in 1962. And Gigi's with me, and Gigi was a legend at Wilmington. We pile into the back of this limo. I don't even know where we're going, and the next thing I know, we turn into Winneter, which is really not Winneter yet. It's Henry DuPont's estate. And we pull in, and the next thing you know, we pull up to a golf course. I never saw anything. I mean, I had heard guys talk about there was a course over there, but I'd never seen it. And, off we went. Caddied for him 18 holes. It was only a 9-hole course, but with two sets of tees, and we played it twice over hill and dale. A lot of the holes were where, if you stand on the 11th hole of Wilmington today, you'll see that open field over there. That actually, where that gazebo was the first tee. And I just still remember, Weymouth saying, apologizing. His three guests were from England, and he said, "Listen, I'm sorry you couldn't play the last time you were in the country, but Henry was using the course that day."
Wow.
His father-in-law.
Right.
I
And,
couldn't
and
invite you because
the membership was that small, huh?
membership was one.
How's that? How is that for a membership? You hear about
Not,
courses, and people
not that
find
many
themselves
people
on.
know that background, but
Wow. I never knew that. And I've caddied at Wilmington time and time again. I'll pop back there, and I never knew that. I know exactly where you're talking about. So that's interesting.
yeah.
So you also you were a member at Hercules, or learned to play? Oh, you said that was the first place that you had broken 80. Is that right?
Yeah, I was. Now that was the old Hercules. So where all those homes are today, if you pull in past the Ashland office, I forget the name of the development, but that was the second nine of Hercules, and it was fairly flat, and it had a couple challenging holes on it.
Yes, it did.
Particularly 13 was a really tough par 4. Almost never parred it, but the rest of them were okay for a whatever it was, 13 or whatever, that I could actually shoot a 38 one day, and it just blew my mind. I said, wow, when you add that to the 40 I had on the front, I just broke 80 for the first time in my life. So
How old were you?
I think I was 13, could have been 14. Thought I was good enough to then go play in the men's state amateur at the old Concord Country Club. And the first hole was up where sort of that all state offices today, or whatever it is, up on that end of off of Route 1.
Right.
And I shot 107. So I was telling him when I turned the card in, I once shot a 78, So I just missed qualifying, I think, by like 32 shots, something like that.
So we have a list of questions to ask you, which we've shared you. But honestly, what you sent to me was so interesting.
By the way, that's the most impressive list of questions I've ever seen. I mean,
I wanted to make sure that we weren't like going to shortchange you.
I've done a lot of communication projects in I used to run communications, and I looked at that and I went, holy hell, this is more work than the annual 10K, for God's sake.
I am going to lead it off with one of those questions, because I've spent a lot of time in the last week reading your book, A Will to Win. And the one thing that really stuck out, it's a theme that appears several times, and it's, the strong family values. And if you go to Huntington Valley's website, they emphasize a family tradition there. Do you think that Bill Heineman's legacy has left his mark on that club?
Oh, you can't. You cannot exaggerate the impact he had up there. Have you ever been there?
Yes.
I haven't been there.
Have you ever been in the Heineman room?
Yes. Yeah. Visited the Hyman room.
Is that perfect or what? Is that?
Yeah. And we had just played a gap match, and Doug Greger, I played him, and he said, come on over, I got to show you this room. And he took me in there, and I spent 10 minutes just walking around, looking at all the quotes and all the trophies that he had won. And just amazing that a club would, be able to do that. It was really cool.
The guy that designed that, he's a former, I guess, curator, historian, or whatever for the USGA. His name's Andy Much. And Andy is currently doing the Sigel Room at Aronimink.
Wow.
And he also recently designed the history display at Wilmington Country Club. And if you haven't seen that, you ought to just stop in and see it. It's very, very impressive. And I was there after playing 18 holes with Gary Cowan, 86 years old. He beat me by 4 shots. Gary, I'm only 79. Come on, man. So, yeah. And we went in and we placed his golf clubs with the center of the face worn out on every iron, including the 9-iron that he hit to win the U.S. Amateur, still considered to be the greatest finishing shot in the history of major championship golf. When he holed out on the last hole for an eagle to win the U.S. Amateur. And he beat his roommate for the week. Drawing a blank for a second, it'll come to me. But he was also staying with the Monkman family. And Jimmy Monkman was my last hit. Their son was my last high school golf match at Porky Oliver. Of course, it was Green Hill in those days. I hadn't changed the name yet, which was another story. but their son was really quite the prodigy. I'll tell you what a prodigy he was. My brother was telling me a story that he was in a pro-am in Texas. He was in a pro-am in Texas, and their pro in the pro-am was Lanny Watkins.
Wow.
And he said, he turned to my brother Kurt and he said, "You're from Wilmington, Delaware?" And Kurt said, "Yeah." My brother used to head the Delaware State Golf Association. I don't know if you know that, for what, 15 years or more. And he said, "Yeah, I'm from Wilmington." He said, "Do you know that guy, Jimmy Monkman?" And Kurt said, "Oh yeah, I know Jimmy Monkman." And Lanny Watkins said, "Boy, he was a hell of a player. He was a hell of a player." So I went, "Whoa, that's saying something." But I beat Jimmy in my last high school match. He missed a 1-foot putt on the last hole. And the last time I saw him, he was headed down DuPont Road. He was so upset with his mother chasing him. So oh,
That's
man.
great.
A 1-foot putt for a tie, and he choked.
Another recurring theme that we see in your books, your subjects often, the last, the 2 books that I've read by you, they grew up in difficult times, to say the least, both living through the Great Depression and World War II. What lessons do you think those experiences taught them? And how did those lessons translate into the way they approach golf?
Well, I'm really biased about generations, and that's with no dispersions upon the 3 gentlemen I'm looking at right now, or the 4, because I'm looking at myself. But I mean, those guys truly were the greatest generation. That's all I got to say. I mean, my mother was the strongest, toughest person I ever met. Grew up in South Philly, born in the middle of the Spanish flu epidemic, when they were bringing the bodies out and leaving them on the sidewalks of South Philly, and just coming down the street with carts and taking them away. These people grew up in hard times. There was no money. And then they went off to war after all that. So they were hard as nails. I personally happen to believe that Porky Oliver would be, you'd be talking about him the same way you talk about Snead and everybody else if he wasn't away for 4.5 years.
Holy smokes.
I mean, he and then all the, the doubt that entered his mind through the U.S. Open and being disqualified and what he went through. But I mean, you look at Oliver, and for his first 5 U.S. Opens that he and Hogan were in together, Oliver was 16 shots better than Hogan, the greatest U.S. Open player of all time. So, I mean, that guy could really play. But back to your question about, the lessons, obviously they didn't know much about, that life could be better. They just worked very, very hard to try to make life better for the kids. That was certainly true with Hyman for different reasons, because he ended up not serving, but he ended up losing his brother. He lost his daughter. His father died when he was a boy, when he was only 14 or something like that. So his life was always very, very challenging. So those guys were very, very, very self-made. And I'll sound like a little bit of a critic here. Like every time I see the pros lined up on the tee at a practice round, and I see these committees that stand behind them with all their badges on, so the tournament would let them in. Like one's the coach, one's the psychologist, Ben Hogan would be rolling over in his grave, looking at this. And it's every one of them. It's not just one of them, So it was a different time. It was a different world. It was a different game for sure. Not to get into the equipment discussion and everything, but you had a question in there about what a difference was. One of the difference was that game that they played and this game these guys play today, those guys really worked the ball. They really worked the ball. They carved out the shots for what the shot called for, played the course, strategically. They had to. When Hogan played Oakland Hills, and I put this in the Oliver book, I went back and I researched all of it. When Hogan played Oakland Hills and brought the monster to its knees, the shortest club, aside from the par fives, the shortest club, he hit into a hole all day for 36 holes of golf, playing with Davy Douglas from Rock Manor. The shortest club he hit in was a 7-iron. Now think about that as compared to the game today. If it's Rory playing that course or, DeChambeau or somebody, they're hitting wedge on 15 of the holes.
Right.
These guys were hitting 1-irons, 2-irons, 3-irons, 4-irons, working the ball, hitting the shots, and still shooting 67 on 7,000-yard golf courses. So there was an enormous ability to overcome adversity, and they all displayed, I thought, an amazing amount of resilience. And you see some of that, with everybody. What story do you want to hear? If it's Masters time, you don't want to hear the story, shall we say Patrick Reed, but whoever, about another kid from the tour with a silver spoon in his mouth that's been coached since the age of 8, and went to Stanford, and everything in their life has been that's not the story you want to hear. The story you want to hear is the guy that really struggled, lost his card 6 times, couldn't make it, his world fell apart, he overcame alcohol, whatever the story is, you want to hear the story. Why is this meaningful in life? And not to cast any dispersions, because these guys are great guys, great golfers. Look at Scotty Scheffler. I think he's been the greatest golfer in the world since he was born. It's just hard to believe, but they therefore they don't make the story that they used to make in those days, because all of them had to overcome something. Lloyd Mangram's like raising his hand and saying, no, I want to go in the infantry. No, I want to go in on D-Day. I want to go in the infantry. He wins 38 times on tour, this guy. He's just wounded several times, hard as nails. Jay Hebert, spent a year in a hospital after Iwo Jima. There are no stories like that anymore.
Right.
It is what it is, right?
When you listen, you read the book, it's unbelievable the things, and that's kind of why I wanted to ask that. It's unbelievable the things that these people went through and came back, and he's still playing and he's still grinding, and he gets knocked down again, and he has horrible things happen with his family and his children, and he still comes back. It's the resilience that I don't think you hear a whole lot about. It's the whole Ben Hogan thing, the overcoming that in 9 months and coming back. It's unbelievable, and it makes for a great story. And these guys are legends. And another reason I like, I wanted to get these podcasts, because I want to get this stuff down, because I think, over time, we won't hear about that as much as the years go on. But also a lot of the people that you mentioned, I don't know about. And so I learned some good lessons along the way.
I got one for you. I walked 9 holes with Ben Hogan playing White Marsh.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Me and like 12 people. And my buddy who I was with, Hogan went over and he got an apple off a tree. I think it was like the 14th hole. Started walking down the fairway. My friend ran over and got 2 apples. He said, "Here, They're good enough for Hogan. They're good enough for us.
Did you tee it up with him, or were you just following? Or
I heard he was going to be in Philadelphia. I called my buddy. He had a car. We were freshmen at the University of Delaware. And I said, it looks like Ben Hogan might play a round of golf in Philadelphia today. And you're a guy with a car, and we were going down Germantown Avenue, and I saw the white cap. Car was still moving. I left the car. The door was wide open, and I said, Fred, there he is. I leaped the fence along Germantown Road and went chasing down as he was coming up 11. Fred somehow or other found a place to park, and boy, was he hot when he met us on the 12th hole.
What was it like getting to watch? I mean, firsthand account. What was he like, and what was his game like at the time?
So this is to give you an idea what his game was like. I've gone back to check this. I think when I was doing one of my books, so I believe it was the spring of 65 or 66. And Hogan in 66 shot 30 on the back nine of Augusta. He was 54 years old. He shot 30 on the back nine of Augusta, finished with 66, another top 10. So that'll just give you an idea, considering he could not putt. That'll give you an idea what kind of a ball striker he was.
Whoa.
He hit on 15, 16 was par 3 up the hill. Dog leg right, like 440. He hit it right in the middle of the dog leg. Pulled out 3 or 4 iron. The pin was on the left front. And he fired I'm going to say 3 iron, maybe 4. He's about 210, right at the flag, just as it was coming in the green, because it was a mound to the left of the green. And just as it came to the left of up to the green, it started to hook a little bit, draw a little bit, hit on the mound, and rolled onto the fringe on the left side. And he looks over at the caddy and he said, "Give me another ball." Goddamn hook. Drops the ball, hits the same shot all over again. At the tail end, it dropped out of the sky and stopped that far to the right of the hole.
Wow.
And he's playing with George Newson, and George Newson just went like and George Newson is in the Siegel book. Siegel played with him. Siegel, as a teenager, played with Knudsen in the Bing Crosby. Can you imagine that as a teenager?
Whoa. I didn't know that.
And Knudsen was considered, even at that time, just as he was starting out on the tour. Well, I shouldn't say as he was starting out, but he came to be considered as one of the greatest ball strikers in golf, and a great student of Hogan, sort of like a Jackie Cupid kind of thing.
Oh my gosh!
The next hole, the par 3 up the hill, is about 165. I think he hit 6 iron because it's straight uphill. Never left the flag. We got up on the green. It was sitting like this far from the hole, and by then there was about 10 people standing around that green, and there was nothing like it. I mean,
did he have a caddy with him that day?
I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. Yeah, he had a caddy, but I don't remember any of that.
But I just wondered, how did he get the yardages at that point? There's no device to give you the exact yardage.
Again at the yardages with the rangefinders today.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a really funny story. So I played this exhibition with Charlie Sifford and Oliver. At the Oliver dedication with Charlie Sifford and Tommy Bolt. Bolt was 67 or 66. Still hit it as good as anybody on the planet. Charlie Sifford had finished second the day before in one of the early senior tournaments. It was the Hall of Fame Classic down at Pinehurst. Had all big names in it like Snead and all those guys. So he didn't hit it. He didn't hit it too bad either. But we went out to dinner together that night with my brother and a real character. You've probably heard his name, even if you've never known him, Davis Cessna, who's pretty renowned around these parts in the golf world. He's in the Siegel book a couple times. He owned Hartfeld. He's the guy that built Hartfeld.
Yep.
And he and Jay were pretty close. But anyway, over dinner that night, I asked Tommy Bolt. They were just telling, just great stories. And every once in a while, Bolt would launch into another Hogan story. And Bolt, Hall of Fame, U.S. Open winner, won 15 times on tour, consistently ranked among the best ball strikers ever. At that point, Nicklaus had won all of his majors with the exception of the 1986 Masters. This is 83. So he had, 17 majors? I had seen Bolt play an exhibition when I was a kid, and it was 1962 at Rock Manor, back in the days when I was actually caddying at Wilmington then, but I played a lot of golf at Rock Manor. And Bolt afterwards was talking to all the gang from Rock Manor, and they were asking him about Nicklaus. How good was Nicklaus? He had just beaten Palmer in the U.S. Open. And he answered by saying, Jack Nicklaus will never be able to shine Ben Hogan's shoes. That's the way he answered the question. I never forgot that. So I'm having dinner with him that night, and I said, hey, Tommy, let me ask you a question. I said, now that Jack's won 17 major championships, how does he compare to Hogan? And he goes, let me think about that, Johnny, me boy. This is the way he talked. He was just a character. He goes, let me think about that. He says, I'll tell you what. He said, if that Nicklaus, if he wins one more major, he'll almost be as good as Hogan.
That's crazy.
Those guys worshiped Hogan. I mean, they just worshiped him. I mean, just crazy the level of respect. I will tell you that in doing the Siegel book, I saw a ton of that in the amateur world, a ton of it. I mean, just Billy Andrade said to me, he said that when Jay gave him advice on the first hole of the Walker Cup, he said, it was like the voice of God. This is what Billy Andrade. Blaze DeRosa said the same thing. He said he played with him in the final group for the Northeast Amateur Championship, and he told the Boston Globe, he said, Jay Siegel is a god. He's one of the gods of golf. He's like, I mean, Blaze DeRosa won 10 Delaware State amateurs. I mean, yeah. He could beat anybody.
Amazing. Evan, jumping over to you. Do you have anything to throw in at the moment?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about your research. Like how do you research such these local heroes? What does that process look like?
Well, the good news is if you look at some of my golf background, it's connected. There's so much of it growing up. I mean, I tell the story in the prologue of the Hyman book that I'm getting ready to tee off in the evening at Wilmington to sneak in a practice round, as many holes as I can, for the U.S. Amateur qualifier that is the next day. And all of a sudden hear this guy come up behind me and says, hey, son, can I join you? I mean, Billy Andrade and the God, I turned around and went into shock. I mean, I went, dear God, it's Billy Hyman. I mean, you talk about a legend. I mean, my father at reading the paper in the morning, I heard it all the time. Billy Hyman, best player in Philadelphia pro or amateur. Billy Hyman, best player here. I mean, he was that good. What's hard to believe is you start doing the research on Jay's life and you go, Jesus, Jay's much better. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Just all you got to do is look at the list of the 50 plus tournaments that Siegel won is just absolutely crazy what he did. But you know, I had an experience with Jay, you know, when I was in college. And again, I mean, to me, he was like a god. I mean, he was like, this guy is just so far out there and Neverland. We all thought he was going to be the next Nicklick. And you know, Oliver, I grew up with Oliver. I knew him as a boy. He grew up with my father. His son, Bobby, was on my golf team in high school. Bobby and I were best friends. Bobby was probably my best friend. First time I ever saw Bobby hit a golf ball, I'm still getting the ball about, 25 feet in the air. It lands about 165 out and rolls to about 180. Every par four is 2 woods and whatever club is left over. And Bobby, freshman in high school, he stands on the first tee and hits it like 260 down the middle, and I'm just going, oh my God. So this is what it's like, Now, Bobby, he had a lot of his dad's fun side in him, but he didn't have the rest of it. So even though he did eventually become pro, he just never got it together golf wise. But he did spend quite a bit of his life in golf. Then I think he became an electrician. But anyway, so first of all, I was around him. I saw it. I lived it. But the interesting thing is when I did my first 2 books, I discovered, and you're probably familiar with it, but I discovered newspapers.com. And I started enjoying the fun of just going back and reading about these guys. And, it really made research fairly easy. Now, the problem was with the Porky book as compared to Heinemann and Siegel is with the Porky book, it was almost exclusively based on research. A lot of it, there were very few interviews. Some wonderful interviews like Al Barkow, who's written a lot of the great books on the PGA. He's about 90 something. Murphy, the Golf in the Kingdom, the famous
Michael Murphy.
Michael Murphy, funniest interview I ever did. Like 90 years old, calls me back from a hippie camp in California in Big Sur. And I said to him, Michael, I said, you have to tell me, you have that phenomenal, your, what do you call them? The, cosmic, his Odyssey or something of the, that lineup of the greatest golfers. I said, you had old Tom Morris, young Tom Morris, Harry Vardon, Bobby Jones, Ben Hogan, and Porky Oliver. I said, how did you arrive at Porky Oliver and he ends up in Golf in the Kingdom? And there's this long pause and he goes, John, I wrote that over 50 years ago. I don't remember why I put him in. That's a good, honest answer anyway. But he told me the story, which was phenomenal. He told me the story that he was there as like a 19-year-old or something. He said, I'm on the 18th green when Hogan's coming in and everybody's congratulating him. He's got the US Open, his 5th US Open. He's won it. And then of course he fumbles it on the 18th hole. And no. He won, but who did I say? Not Cupid, because I'm just reading about him. He just died. But Jack Fleck. So Hogan cautioned everybody and said, no, Jack Fleck's still got a couple holes to play. Don't don't prematurely congratulate me. He joins Valerie Hogan and two of Hogan's best friends, and he just follows them into the clubhouse. He tells me this story. He says I end up at a table sitting there with these friends, Valerie Hogan, Ben Hogan, and everybody must be sitting there going, who is this kid sitting with us? And he said, while they're waiting, he said, all of a sudden you could hear this roar go up from the crowd, you know, that Fleck had birdied the last hole and there was going to be a playoff. So that was just a crazy interview. But, you know, other interviews like Gary Player, you know, first win he ever had, he was playing with Porky in 1957 at the Kentucky Derby Open. And so anyway, you know, just being able to do that with the Oliver book was good, but most of the Oliver book was like pure research. If you go to the bibliography, a lot of books, because I read a lot of books on golf, and I did a lot of, you know, I did a lot of fact checking in the books, and but the most advantageous book, I think the major reason I was able to do the Oliver book, and I will show it to you if I can see it here. Hold on just a second. Well, I don't see it, and I don't want to waste a lot of time, but Al Barkow in about 1995, in conjunction with the PGA, basically wrote the official history of the PGA up to that point in time. And he ranked the best 300 players in the history of the game. And then he ranked them by decade. And there were multiple photos of Oliver with the famous George May, who ran the big money tournament in Chicago every year, and he always wore Hawaiian shirts. And he and Nelson and Oliver are going off the tee, and together they had a great photo of that. But anyway, I interviewed Barkow, but mostly what I did was to use his book because it captured everything. He told me in like gory detail how the system that they use, and then the committee that they had with Dean Beeman to determine where players came out on the list and as the greatest of all time. And the system basically gave points to where you finished in the tournament. It didn't go by money. So, you know, the great play, as the money went up all those years, obviously the money list skews everything. But they use this point system. If you had a top 3, you got this number of points. You had a top 10, you got that number, et cetera, et cetera. So I forget the exact rankings. They were in my book, I think, on Oliver. But I think Oliver turned out like 31st, you know, best of all time. But because other guys were mid-career, for instance, he's got people like Johnny Miller and Fuzzy Zeller behind him. You know, guys are still going to win. I mean, even though Miller had won a major or 2 majors, he didn't have the body of top 10s and all that sort of thing. So that was a big part of the research for that. The research for Hyman was far more interviews. I don't know if you remember a guy by the name of David Brookerson, Hall of Fame golfer from Philadelphia. He was on the golf team at Huntington Valley. And just before he died, I spent like 2.5 hours on the phone with him, laughing most of the time because he's one of the funniest people on the planet. But he's the guy that told me the Trevino story that you read in the book, that the bet that Hyman and Trevino had that time, you know, because Hyman was a big gambler and nobody wanted to let me, I think, you know, really track that down. But he was quite a gambler. He wasn't a drinker, and he never. Part of my research, I went up and I had his regular caddy at Huntington Valley. I played with his son-in-law and his grandson. Or was it 2 grandsons? I'm trying to remember. And we had Bill, and I had Bill as regular caddy as my caddy. And I said, what was unusual? But tell me something about him that was really, you know, you're like one of your best memories. And he says, well, the main thing I remember is I never heard him say a curse word in his life. Not one piece of foul language, a single curse word, ever. Like, aw shucks was the worst thing he ever said. Can you imagine that in a golfer, right? And he was very religious, go to church on Sunday and all that. But his daughter told me, she said, my father would bet on snow in July. And she also told me that, and I had that in the book, I think, but she also told me that when he was walking her down the aisle, he had an old transistor radio in his pocket with an earphone because the Kentucky Derby was running when he was walking her down the aisle. And
no way.
That's
wow.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So, but that's the way you put it together. Now, the J book is really, really different because I can pretty much talk to all the contemporaries. I mean, it was a fun exercise in that sense. You need to know something from Bob Murphy, the great, telecast and pro. You call up Bob Murphy and you talk to him. Jim Colbert. I spent over 2 hours on the phone with Jim Colbert. You talk about a storyteller. And Jay kept saying to me, John, did you talk to Colbert yet? And I go, no. I wanted to talk to him when I got to the senior tour party. You better talk to him. He's like 86 years old. You don't want to wait too much longer. Of course, obviously, he's still around. Jay's not. But he was just loaded with story after story. Jay's not a big storyteller, particularly about himself. He'll tell you stories about other people, but not a big storyteller. So the big help in putting the book together and turning it into good stories in Jay's voice was really hearing these firsthand accounts. I mean, the last 6 months, I was constantly calling these people back and going, now tell me about the 18th hole again. What was Jay hitting on his second shot and where were you standing? Stuff like that. I mean, just to get the details so I could, I could get it down in the book, because in some cases the newspapers were great because they'd go into a lot of detail, and like some of the majors, particularly the British newspapers are very good at that in the Walker Cup and in the British Amateur, like when he played Scott Hoke to win the British Amateur, that sort of thing. But, that's hopefully that helps answer your question. That was that's kind of the way the process would run. So I had less. And by the way, one thing I should say, true of both the Oliver book in particular, but also the Hyman book. Pete Trenum was my fact checker, and you guys must know who Pete Trenum is, right? He's the PGA historian of Philadelphia.
Okay.
I'm not familiar. I'll be honest.
Oh my gosh. Go to Trevor Trenum. He calls it Trenum Treasure Troves of Golf. You guys will get every single thing that you ever wanted to know about every pro that ever played in the history of Philadelphia, and then some.
Mm-hmm.
Pete knows everything. And when I sent him the Oliver book, thinking I was pretty smart, he sent me back 20 pages of edits, 200 entries.
Oh my gosh. Holy smokes.
Wow.
And wait a minute, I accepted like 195 of them. There were like 5 I didn't agree with.
Wow.
I mean, he can tell you. I will tell you, for instance, this one really blew my mind, but I'm probably not going to be able to get the name. It is in the book. He read the book and he says, that's not who Oliver played with when he played with Babe Zaharias. And you guys all remember the Babe, right? The greatest female athlete in history. So he played an exhibition with her at Wilmington Country Club. And Pete says, and that's not the other player in the group. And he proceeds to explain to me who she is, that I think she had come from St. David's, where Pete was the pro. She had won like the Philly Amateur and multiple other tournaments. Her brother was Henry Williams. You know who Henry Williams is? Henry Williams, I first knew him because he was the pro at Mazellum Springs, and I was a member there for about 10 years, had one of these non-resident memberships. But I then learned that Henry Williams was runner-up in the PGA Championship. I mean, Henry Williams was a top player on the tour from way back in Oliver's generation. Now, I don't think he ever won anything that I recall, but if you go back and you look at the old newspaper stories and everything, you start going through the big names who played the tour from Philadelphia in those days. Think of guys like Ski Regal, if you remember that name. You know, You'll see Henry Williams all the time. So Pete just knows everything, you know, and he's like 90 years old. And I played golf with him last year. I played golf with him a couple of times. I invite him down to play Wilmington, he and his son, for all the help he gave me with the book. And he says, "Oh, we don't want to play Wilmington." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "No, we want to play Porky Oliver." Like, oh my gosh. Okay. So I took him to play Porky Oliver. You know, I mean, that he and his son both are just crazy history buffs. His son more so of a golf course history buff. So he's one of these guys who's like deep in the weeds, like on Tillinghast and Donald Ross and, you know, whatever, Flynn. I mean, these, you know how there's about every 1 out of 100th golfer you meet is just deep in the weeds on golf course architecture, history, design, all of that. And by the way, a good book, which was a good book for research for most of my books, covered most of it, was the life story of Robert Trent Jones. It's called A Difficult Par, written by a guy by the name of Jim Hansen. And I happened to play golf with him. And I gave him my Porky Oliver book after we played golf that day. And he nominated my Porky Oliver book for the Herbert Warren Wyndham Award as the top book in golf. And it became a finalist for the award. And but Hansen won that award for the book on Robert Trent Jones. But it was very, very helpful in my books because, you know, Jones just covered the spectrum of I mean, his name, for instance, I never knew this, so I read it in the book. His name was Robert Jones, and he kind of wanted to dovetail on, you know, the reputation of Bobby Jones, so his name was Bobby Jones too. So he changed his middle name to Trent, so he'd also have T in his name.
Wow.
You know, because Bobby Jones was Robert Tyre Jones. So anyway, we're getting off subject of my stuff, but yeah, look up Pete Trenum. He knows more than anybody, and he's still around.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to do that. You know, as far as running, you know, we're running a little low on time here. Evan, would you be able to ask the segment 5, the last question, about Delaware?
Sure can.
Yeah, ask it again. I'm trying to, because I'm not really looking at the list of questions.
That's okay. I can ask you. So, what is the most special aspect in Delaware, or what Delaware offers when it comes to golf and golf culture?
Well, I think there's a great history, number one. Most of that history, you know, is on the shoulders of Porky Oliver. But, you know, the Delaware State Golf Association has been around since what, about 1950, eventually merged a couple years ago into Philadelphia. And So it's really, continued the game, preserved the game. The state has a great mix, I think, of both private and public venues or daily fee. It's unfortunate that we've lost a number of courses. Really, the land value relative to what you can make from golf. I was fairly active because in the periphery of the Hercules deal, because I was, head of public affairs at Hercules at the time that we sold the course. And the county rezoned the property to housing. When they rezoned the property to housing, the new owners looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, it's worth tens of millions as houses, and we can't even make a profit. So how long does it take to figure that business deal out?
Right.
And, I chaired for a number of years, or co-chaired, or was on the committee of the Leukemia Golf Classic for, I guess, over a dozen years. We brought the biggest names, in golf to Delaware every year to play there. I don't know if you were ever there for any of those. You guys are kind of young, but my friend Charlie McDowell, by the way, Charlie McDowell, who plays his golf out of Wilmington and Pine Valley, beat Jay for the national championship at the Cornell course designed by Robert Trent Jones when they were boys. And Charlie was 16 and Jay was 17, and he beat him for the national championship.
Whoa.
But Charlie and I, and another friend of mine, Tom Saccani, who I think was club champ, he played on the Delaware golf team with me. We caddied for Greg Norman, Peter Jacobson, and Fuzzy Zeller in an 18-hole exhibition at Leukemia when Greg was number 1 in the world, Fuzzy was top 10 in the world, and Peter was easily the most entertaining guy in golf, may still be to this day, but certainly a great player. I think he won like 7 times on tour. Great player, and won a U.S. Senior Open too. So, but we caddied for them that day in front of a gallery of about, about 2,000 people, I think. And I caddied for Fuzzy, and he kicked my tail for 18 holes, let me tell you.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So we have, we have a lot of fun history, great history. I was involved in as I mentioned, in the changing of the name in honor of Porky in 1983, and then playing the exhibition with Charlie Sifford and Tommy Bolt. I never tire of telling that story. Both Sifford drove like all night long to get here. No fee, no nothing. Bolt flew in from Arkansas, no fee, no nothing. But I love Tommy Bolt. I went up to the airport to pick him up, and he got off the plane. I booked a ticket for him, or I did it through Greeno. I can't remember, when we were changing the name. I can't remember how it worked, but sent him a plane ticket, and he got off the plane just as dapper as he always is, like with a sport coat on, and everything. And he takes the ticket, and he just like hits me right in the chest with it like this, and he goes, "Johnny, you owe me some money. I always fly first class."
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Great stories. The year we had John Daly, I'm still on the phone at midnight with his agent. It was when the baby of his girlfriend was due, and he was also afraid to fly. So we actually did not know, after having a contract with John Daly, whether he was coming the next morning. And I can't remember what it was, that late that night or the next morning, I get a call from his agent, and he said, "He's coming. I got him on a plane. He's coming. We'll be there at like 11:30. Well, we had already teed off. We got people on the course, I don't know what the heck we're going to do. Now I'm having nightmares about going to Philly to pick him up. So I called a buddy of mine who who had a police department under him. He was running the DRBA and they had their own police force. And I said, hey, can I get a couple of cop cars to go up to Philly to pick up John Daly? And he said, you got him. So I hop in a police car. We go out to get John Daly at the airport. He gets in the car. He looked like death warmed over. He gets in the car. He's literally got the shakes. He says to me, and I'm going, how's this guy going to perform today? And he says to me, you got to do me a big favor. I said, what's that? He says, you got to drive straight to a McDonald's. I need a Big Mac immediately.
Oh my goodness.
From the Philly airport, set in a line at a McDonald's to feed John Daly. And then as soon as we got to the golf course, I get out of the car and he grabs my arm again and he goes, John. I said, what? I need 2 Budweisers immediately.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
So I'm getting off the track of all these other, things in Delaware golf, but no, a lot of fun times and fun history.
That's excellent. Mike, do you have anything, or we are pretty low on time here?
Okay. What made Porky Oliver so likable to both the fellow competitors and to the crowd that he played in front of? It really isn't apparent the specifics of that.
Yeah, I cover that a little bit in the book, but he one of the best things I ever saw, and I quote this in the book. Sports Illustrated did an article about him in 57, I think it was 1957, and they headlined the article "The Second Man." I think by that time in his pro career, he had been runner-up, in 3 majors, and runner-up 18 or 19 other times. So they called him the Second Man. And in the writer, in the interviews he did and everything for the article, he called Oliver the most popular player on the tour. And he said, when he comes into a locker room on tour, I forget his exact words, but he said it was like he said when he comes into the locker room on tour, it's like the parade coming to town. He said everybody's yelling at him and high-fiving him. And, he just said, this guy is just, and he was that way with the galleries. One thing, he had a great trick shot repertoire. One of his favorites, I saw Payne Stewart when he was here, and I could talk all day about Payne Stewart, but he copied one of Oliver's tricks. He would get up and he would get on the tee of like a major tournament. He'd get on the tee and he would pretend he was a woman. Like he'd even reach in and pull his bra strap up, and he would wiggle and he would do this and he would do that, and everybody would just be going crazy with laughter. And then he would swing at the ball and he would just nick the top of the ball. So it'd fall off the tee and go like a yard, I mean, he would just waste a shot. And then he just step forward with his driver and then just pound it like 270 down the middle, So he had all these trick shots, like at Hogan's tournament at the Colonial every year. He used to do a big show before the event, and just carry on with all these various trick shots that he had. He wasn't, like number one in the trick shot business, like a Paul Hahn or who was the old pro that was at Huntington Valley. That's some great history, by the way, if I could think of his name. His son ended up being a movie star and won a tournament on tour. How about that? His son played Joe Palooka in the movies, like a series of 6 movies, and went out on tour and won a tournament.
You mentioned him in A Will to Win. Was he Australian or something?
Yeah, he's from Australia. Yeah. And it was said that he gave golf lessons to the Emperor of Japan, among other things. He was just What a character. They had characters in those days, let me tell you. But Oliver, but I think the main thing is that Oliver loved everybody and everybody loved him.
Yeah, it comes through that way. I just wondered, was it physical comedy? Was it, and what you said, kind of illustrates how much charisma he had.
I really believe, that famous saying that Vermeil likes to use all the time, if you know Dick Vermeil, that people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And Porky Oliver made everybody feel good. In fact, at one point I know in the book, he said, well, it was some guy from the Army. How can I not, because Sarrazin and Snead, all the other guys who used to yell at him, why don't you concentrate and you'd win the tournament? He says, well, I can't ignore these people. They're friends of mine. If I see them over there on the side, I got to go talk to them. Don't I? Like he didn't know, he didn't know he was supposed to act like Jay Sigel. No, go win the tournament, So that was just who he was. He couldn't.
Is there a current player like him now?
Well, if you walk into the Oliver Golf Club, right in the lobby, they have a big photo of Porky. They got a lot of big photos of Porky in there. Have any of you been there in the lobby of the? Okay, and you walk in there and it says, I should know this because it's right on the cover of the book too, I think, but it basically says that life without the laughs wouldn't be worth living. And everybody will tell you that's the way he lived. I mean, as a young guy, and when he went off the tour, I cannot exaggerate to you how much the people of this town loved that guy. I grew up with all of them, and Bobby was a riot. I remember we got arrested, our senior, not arrested, but we got picked up by the cops our senior year in high school. He was trouble. I mean, he was trouble. And it goes, and I said, Bobby, I don't want to go out there. We're in the weeds on north of Wilmington. This guy's house with some beer. I don't want to go out there. The cops keep going up and down the road. He says, John, you don't have to worry about a thing. He said, I just tell them, I'm Porky's kid, and that's it. They let us go.
Did you ever play golf with Porky Oliver?
No. I actually never saw him. One of my great regrets, Kurt saw him hit a golf ball up at Jeffersonville, that old Jeffersonville Open. He went up and caddied for my father that day, which he hated doing, caddying for my father, but he loves the memory of having seen Oliver hit a golf ball. So, but sadly, I did see him dying. I saw him many times when I was a boy because, coming home from the tour, and I'd be over their house. And he was nice. He would just say, hey, how's your dad? That was about the extent of my interaction with him. And but when he was dying, I saw him laying on the couch in his living room with the whole scar from where they took his lung out, just laying there. Terrible, just terrible. That was not a memory that I wanted to keep, but I haven't been able to forget it. Struggling to breathe, by the way.
Well, not to go out on a bad note here, but it does look like we are out of time. So I want to, there's one last thing so that way we don't go out on a terrible note here. The three of us are members at DuPont Country Club, and you mentioned in the bio that you sent me last night that you have great memories of Nemours, and I love Nemours. I played it this morning. What can you tell us about, you said, you mentioned what's now 14 was 11. The guys that I'm going to send this to that work with me, we all go out and we all play Nemours all the time. If you can give us some old Nemours stuff, I would love that.
I played in the junior amateur there as an 11-year-old. I shot 138. I lost my first match 10-8 to my cousin. Total and utter humiliation. But I do remember while I was on the tee, we had this kid, his name was Nelson Murray, went on to play golf at the University of Delaware. And as a 16-year-old, I think he was the longest driver of a golf ball on the planet. And all the ladies that ran the DSGA in those days and the volunteers from DuPont, they were all on the first tee. So you get down, you play the first hole, right? And it's like, what, 310 or 320 coming back up? Well, in those days, I mean, kids, a long drive was 200 yards. Nelson flew it onto the first tee. He didn't know where it was going. He hooked it from the second tee onto the first tee with people diving for cover.
Wow.
That's how far he could hit a golf ball. And but I have a ton of memories. And in fact, I think to this day, I have never parred. And I have a collection of balls. You can still probably find some of my golf balls in the creek in front of, 15 now, the par 3 down the hill.
Yeah.
And the couple times I've been back over the course of my life, I keep thinking, can I get over this phobia about the old 12th hole? Now, I can't get over it. But I can remember when we were playing high school golf. So the 14th hole in those days was a par 5, and it ran down along 141. And directly on the other side of the street was the entrance to Alfred I. DuPont's home. Now, he was dead by then, but his wife was still living. And she used to pull up, with the chauffeur and the long limo every once in a while. We'd see the gates open. We'd always stand on the hill on the 14th green and peer over, the broken bottles that were embedded into the top of and take a look at all this. But one of my great memories from there was my friend Freddie Phillipson, who I caddied for in the Delaware State Amateur in 1962. And he won the championship with me on the bag. He was also first man and captain on the Salesianum team when I was a junior. He was a senior. And he got mad on the 14th hole one night that we were out there, and he emptied out his bag on the 14th fairway, and he threw each club as far as he could in every direction. And he was still out there 10 o'clock at night with a flashlight trying to find his clubs. So,
that's hilarious.
So that's one of my affectionate memories of the of playing golf in the Moors in those days. But absolutely loved that golf course.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Well, you have a standing invite from the three of us. If you'd like to be a fourth at any time this summer, shoot us a text, let us know, and we'd love to see you.
Fun. So, we love it. I never miss an opportunity to get over there if I can.
Yeah,
great fun. I had a lot of stories about what we called Black Gates in those days. They changed the name to Munchanan. It was called Black Gates back then, and we could never figure out why we couldn't shoot anything resembling par. And I was literally an adult before I realized, well, when the greens are only 10 feet wide and they got bunkers next to them, the golf course is, just insanely difficult for a tiny little golf course. You could hit shots you thought were pure all day long, and the next thing you know, you're making bogey or double bogey. It's just the way it was. It's good places to learn how to play golf. I'll tell you that much. Kind of like the old, lot the way Jay came up, particularly playing courses like White Marsh and Bala, which was a Flynn course, and Aronimink, which was a Donald Ross course. Always playing all those golf courses, he got kind of like both sides of the game, not just a great ball striker, but knowing how to play the really hard golf courses.
No, that's pretty special. That's awesome to hear that. We are way over time, and I'm getting the notification on my Google thing that we're going to run out of time here soon. But I want to thank you, and I really appreciated it. And for you to take time out of what you do, which is really impressive to spend time with us. Thank you. And, hopefully, this is going to go out to a lot of the guys that I work with. And some of these guys are way younger, and they're going to get to hear about some of the great golf of Delaware. And, these guys are guys who are playing Porky Olivers and playing Wilmington and playing DuPont and Bitterman and all these places. So for them to hear a little bit about the history, that's really interesting. I know it will go a long way for them.
One of the big stories in the book, by the way, you may have read it in Gap magazine, but was Jay winning that thing by 12 shots, the Philadelphia Open.
Yep.
Against all the pros. He beats them by 12 shots. And Pete Tranum told me this story. I'm trying to remember the guy's name that finished second. I knew the pro that was low pro in the morning. He shot 72. So he was only 6 behind Jay. Jay shot 66, broke the course record. Pete Tranum tells me the story. He says, I'm taking the scorecards. He said, and he comes in and he just takes the score. He looks at the scoreboard. He takes the scorecard back and he starts heading to his car, throw his clubs in the car. He said, so I had to chase after him. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm not going to turn the card in. He says, look at what that guy Jay Siegel shot. He says, look at what Siegel shot. So I'm not turning the card in. And Pete goes, you're low pro. You won first place money. You better turn it in.
Unreal.
All right. I'll let you guys go.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. And yeah, and again, thank you.